This is Andy, the skipper of 70,000 tons of metal, the original, the world's biggest heavy metal cruise, and you're listening to Rockspeak.
Hello, friends. This is Carlos here at Rockspeak, a new chapter of Rockspeak. Today, we have a great interview, a great guest who we met in Bogota after the Monsters of Rock Festival. We received a call from the 70,000 Tons of Metal organization, and the PILLER, his CEO, its CEO, who calls himself the skipper of the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, was going to be here in Colombia, in Bogota. And they wanted us to interview him. And it was great because we really love the 70,000 Tons of Metal. I was there once, and we met. It is great that Andy is not a native speaker. He is a German with Swiss roots. So this interview. It's full of information if you love metal. If you want to travel for vacation next January, February for a cruise, this is the metal cruise. This is the trip. And at the same time, as he is not a native, what you will listen to will help you a lot in your path towards understanding, to listening, to improve your English, which is exactly what Rockspeak is about. I try to practice my English, trying to communicate with you, and also you can practice your listening, maybe listening to some of your favorite topic. If you like metal, hard rock, cruises, anyway. So let me tell you about this, because reviewing the interview, we didn't talk much about it. The 70,000 Tons of Metal is going to be next January 29th. So it ships from Miami this time to Puerto Plata at the Dominican Republic. From January 29th, usually sailing at noon, and returning February the 2nd, 2024. We're talking about 70,000 Tons of Metal next year in January. Andy told us about the story of the cruise and a lot of things. I don't want to give more details. I think, I believe you will enjoy this great conversation. You will notice we said basically nothing. This guy is full of stories. He speaks, you will notice that. So without further ado, this is Andy PILLER, the founder and CEO, the skipper of the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, the biggest metal cruise in the world.
Okay, most of metalheads know there is out there every end of January, in the middle of the toughest winter in Europe and northern United States and Canada, a ship for 3,000 people who fly all over the world to gather together for 5 to 6 days, where 60 metal bands play 120 shows in different venues inside one of the biggest cruise ships out there. I have the honor of having some of the time of his time. Andy PILLER, he's the man behind this idea of the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise. Andy, the first thing I would like to know is where this idea came from, and how many years did it take you to see it real, tangible?
So first of all, it's a real honor to be here and to have me featured on your show, and have me here in your beautiful country of Colombia. It's not my first time here, as some people know, and I have some special affection with this country. We also had several Colombian bands on 70,000 Tons of Metal in the past, some really good bands here. But to answer your question, this is now about 16 years ago. So give you first about a little bit of background of mine. I started as a small concert promoter 30 years ago in Switzerland. And this grew afterwards very, very quickly. I did bigger concerts. I was still in school. My parents weren't so happy about that choice, and I had to repeat classes and whatever, So one day, my parents, they were like, "Son, either you finish school, you go to university, we pay for your life, we buy you a car, whatever, or you do this music bullshit, and at the end of the month, you're out of our house and you don't get a cent, And of course, I was like, bye-bye,
Where?
So, yeah, and...
first.
being a concert promoter sometimes is a really risky business. You can make a lot of money, but you can also lose a lot of money in one night, Yeah. So it was always an up and down. This moved more into an agency role. I was an agent afterwards, booking bands, like also the neighboring countries, because I spoke the languages that helped, to France, to Italy, to Austria, until one day, I think that was like sometime in the 90s, I booked almost half the European tour for Overkill, and they needed a tour manager. So they asked me, "Hey Andy, do you know somebody, or do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Oh, well, why not?" So I did that tour as a tour manager. Obviously, I did something right, because after that tour, like other managements, they called me and whatever, and then I spent almost 15 years of my life on the road as a tour manager, and that's something that brought me to Canada several times. I worked with some Canadian bands, especially out of Vancouver. I went several times to Vancouver with my ex-girlfriend at that time, and we were young and crazy, and I was like, hey, every time I need to go to work, I need an airport. Every time I need to come back from work, I just need an airport. Why don't we move to Vancouver? And we had no plan, no nothing. The next day we went and we rented an apartment, So not this apartment, but after a year we moved. It was a bad choice. I had very long an apartment, like really like 150 meters from the cruise ship pier in Vancouver. And when people think about cruises, Canada doesn't come first to mind. But in the summer half of the year, there is a lot of cruises that go to Alaska. And so I was sitting on my balcony, and now this is, as I said, this is almost 16 years ago. And once again, these stupid ideas, we were drinking. Obviously, I had a drink too many. And I was like, we should rent one of these cruise ships and put a heavy metal festival on. And then all my friends were like, Andy, you're crazy. That's never going to work. Like people are going to fall overboard, and people are going to die. They're going to sink the ship, like all these ideas, So the next day I woke up, I had a big headache, but this idea was still spinning in my mind. I knew a lot about the live music industry. I knew every angle. I was a promoter, I was an agent, I was a tour manager, as I just explained. But I didn't know anything about cruise ships. Yeah. I didn't even know how to spell cruise ship, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to learn something about this industry. I went on a whole bunch of cruises myself. I talked with the cruise lines, because I had my very clear vision, So I saw immediately all these cruise ships, they have a big theater on board, but there is seats inside. So heavy metal seated doesn't really work, So these seats need to come out. And I also wanted from the beginning on the pool deck stage, like deck over one of these swimming pools and put a big open air stage there. So this vision I had from the beginning on, finding the right ship that really suited our needs, and also convincing a cruise line. Because especially in America, I think it's maybe in both Americas, but in the US especially, there is a different stigma attached to heavy metal. It's not like in Europe where heavy metal is mainstream and everybody, so convincing them, hey, metalheads are actually the friendliest people that there are around. They don't destroy your ship. They probably listen to loud music. Yeah. They probably have like a scary look.
Or dressing custom in the night.
But if you get to know metalheads, they are the dearest people that you know. You know, so this. But the biggest challenge was financing. You want to charter a cruise ship, we're talking about millions of dollars. And you need to come with this money up in advance, you know. So either you get a bank guarantee or all the money in advance. If you want a bank guarantee, you need to have this money too. Money that I didn't just have. And also convincing then investors to invest in something that has no track record. Nobody has done this before. Everybody thinks that this is crazy or so. So it took 3.5 years until the first edition of 70,000 tons of metal.
Oh.
But it worked very well, you know, like this crazy idea. And as I often say, this is not like the obvious combination, heavy metal and a luxury cruise ship. But often in life, opposites attract each other. And it worked out perfectly, and many more years, you know. So here we still are. So
it is worth all this effort. So you took many ships, many crews, and you studied everything, and you began to, and finally you made it.
Exactly. I mean, this was a smaller ship, but I mean, it was the Majesty of the Seas. Was like 73,590 tons or whatever, you know. That's not a name that it really sounds so good. So, but this is where the name comes from, 70,000 tons of metal. That's the displacement of the ship. In the meantime, we are on a much bigger ship. We are like this year and also next year, again, 70,000 tons of metal will be on the Freedom of the Seas. It's 154,000 tons, so technically it's 2.2 times 70,000 tons. But I can't change the name. Look, I mean, there is so many people, which to me this is crazy, because I drew this logo myself 15 years ago or 16 years almost ago, and now there is people all over that have this logo tattooed, and there is some girls that have it tattooed over their back, which is like, what the fuck, man, you know, like to me this is, you know, for me, I'm just some guy that had some crazy idea, you know, and I designed this logo, and now people walk around, these girls with this tattooed on their back, you know. It makes me proud, of course, you know, but I still, like, this is hard to comprehend, you know.
Great. As the ship goes out from Florida.
That's right.
And the metal you're focused is from Europe, right? There's going to be a lot of people coming from all over the world to Florida to take that. Can you give us, out of your mind, the top 5 of countries going to your cruise?
It is changing from year to year, but I also have to say that we have this global community on board. And in the last couple of years, it has always been, it's interesting with the numbers, it's always been more than 70 different nations. So more than 70 nations on 70,000 tons of metal, you know. We jokingly always call 70,000 tons of metal the United Nations of heavy metal at sea. And it truly is. Now, naturally, because the ship leaves from Miami, or sometimes we went from Fort Lauderdale, but it's a suburb of Miami, right? So the number 1 country actually is the US. Number 2 is Germany. Number 3 is usually Canada. And then, well, money plays a role there too, right? Switzerland is very strong, but it moves around. There is several other countries, mainly European countries. We have a lot of people from the Netherlands. We have a lot of people from Belgium. A lot of people from Sweden and from Finland. Australia was already in the top 10. Economic situations change, but I tell you one thing, I'm getting old, and maybe sometimes I still drink too much or whatever, so I don't remember everything anymore, and it's many years too. But I remember there was 1 or 2 years where Colombia actually was in the top 10, not in the top 5, but in the top 10. And it's always like around there, like top 10, top 11, top 12, Colombia. Mexico is really strong too, you know. And then it's all over, you know, like it goes from Chile to South Africa and from New Zealand to Iceland and like from everywhere. And we have people on board that come from countries that are at war with each other, you know. But they're all there on this ship doing one party together for the love of the music. And it's all just friendship and peace, you know. And this is very, very special. And that's the thing that probably makes me most proud.
Anyway, do you know anybody who decided to go to war with another country? We don't. I don't.
It's power games, it's politics, you know. So no, personally not, you know. But unfortunately, this is still a reality, you know.
Of course. So let's talk about Latin America. We're so close, and there's a lot of metal people. You see, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
2 days ago we had. Well, they say 50,000 people. It could be 35,000. We don't.
I know the numbers, you know, because I know people in the industry, you know, promoter, whatever, you know, people that work there. So of course this is always confidential kind of thing, you know. But yeah, I mean, you saw a full stadium full of people, you know, like with all these bands, with Saxon. No, Saxon actually didn't play, but with Halloween and Angra and Deep Purple and Scorpions and Kiss and so on. It's a big party, you know. And 2 days from now, there is actually 3 bands that all have been on my cruise, which is except Stratovarius and Gravedigger.
And then it'll be a testament with Creator, and this month is like 4.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, even the day after the Accept show, I think there is Benediction, you know, which also I have a very, very long, very good relationship with. You know, I've been also their tour manager, like back in the 90s. You know, there's a couple of funny stories that I don't know if I want to tell them all on camera. You know, but let's just say these guys know how to drink. You know. So,
oh my God! Yeah, of course. So Andy, how do you decide which band is going to your cruise?
You know, it's a long process. You know, certainly I have my own kind of wish list, what I think, and it's not necessarily my personal preferences, because this is always dangerous as a promoter. You know, you cannot just follow your own likes. You can't. You know, you can't be too much of a fan. Actually, that's a mistake. It comes down to band availability too. You know, some bands, they have auto tours, they have studio time, etc. But I travel around a lot. It's always when people ask me, where do you live? I always say, in planes and airports and hotels, and sometimes on cruise ships, right? So I meet with a lot of bands, with their agents, with their managements. Sometimes we come up with cool ideas, not for any reason. We had a lot of like record release parties on board.
Yeah, Blind Guardian. I remember Blind Guardian released their album. I was there. I saw it.
Blind Guardian did that. Venom did that. Elevate did that. Corby Clanny did that, and so on. You know, so there is a lot of like album premieres. Sometimes bands actually play their album live on board before it gets released. This is not what you get anywhere. You get this on 70,000 Tons of Metal, the original, the world's biggest heavy metal cruise. Yes, not everywhere. So this is a process that takes a lot of time, and a lot of things around 70,000 Tons of Metal are. I get a lot of feedback from the band, from the fans, you know.
From the survivors.
So from we call them survivors, right? You know. So they make their own wish lists. This is not an all-deciding factor, but I certainly like look at that too. It's also kind of a reassurance in the end for me that I actually did a good job or not. You know, it's not the all-deciding factor, but I certainly look at that and listen to that as well. You know, so and then sometimes things don't work of various reasons. Bands are not available because they are on tour with, or they probably have studio time booked. Sometimes, you know, a lot of musicians in a band, they also play in other bands. So they are probably busy with their other project and it doesn't work. Yeah, well, then you try next year. Sometimes it takes many, many years. Finally, you get it.
Finally.
Yeah.
So I also think many of them are European, and they have to anyway fly.
That's right.
And maybe it's not. It doesn't. It doesn't fit with their touring in the U.S., for example. They're not in South America, so that could be a challenge there, right? I was going to ask you, do you have a dream list already to check?
I wouldn't call it like a dream list, like a wish list or whatever. Yeah, there are some bands that I work on for many, many years, and for the one or the other reason, it just never worked, you know. I always say, oh, one day I will get them all, you know. There are a very, very few bands that kind of don't like the idea. At the beginning, this was much more. So, like at the beginning, like because at the beginning, like people, Andy, you're crazy, you know. especially for the bigger bands, they were like, oh my God, we are going to be locked up. At this time, it was 2,000 fans. Now it's 3,000 fans, you know. But it was also just 40 bands. The idea, by the way, comes from. This was also my concept from the beginning on. I want to create a very special atmosphere with no VIP areas, with no backstage areas, and we don't have this on the ship. We, by the way, we really celebrate this from the check-in in the terminal. It doesn't matter if you're from the biggest band or you're the smallest customer in a 4-person interior cabin on deck 2. You go through the same security check, you do the check-in at the same place, and you go over the same gangway, and then you can tell these people 1,000 times. People can read articles, they can watch videos of it. You have to experience this yourself. Something happens in your subconscious, but not just for the fans, also for the bands. Once they walk on this ship, they realize, oh my God, we are really, in the true sense of the meaning, we're on the same boat. And some mutual respect develops, you know, like from the fans to the musicians, and also from the artists to the fans, you know. We take some pressure off because we have a scheduled meet and greet for every band on board, so people don't have to run around with all their memorabilia and ask the musicians when they have dinner or whatever to. So you can go there, you can get all your signatures, you can get your photo, and then everybody can have a vacation and a party. But one of the reasons I booked so many bands, because also about this, like at the beginning, all my press partners and so, they were like, Andy, you can also do this with 20 bands or 30 bands. But my idea was this: I want to have an artist, a musician to fan ratio of 1 to 10. So the average band has 5 musicians, right? Well, some they only have 3 or 4. But then, you know, you have some of these folk bands, you know, like they have 8 or 9 or 11 or whatever, you know. So let's say an average 5. So 40 bands, 200 musicians, 2,000 fans. It's 1 to 10. And then when we moved to the bigger ship where we have about 3,000 tickets, I had, okay, we have 60 bands. So the ratio is 1 to 10. And this also creates the special atmosphere, you know. Like you can look left and right and there is always a musician, you know. So
the bar, everybody's there.
This is why, you know, I always say, you know, we don't need a VIP area. Everybody is a VIP, right? Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It's so great to hear this. You already said that survivors give you input about the fest. So, what does a band needs to be considered for the cruise? And let me explain a little bit. Do the way you have the cruise thought, do the bands need to consider they will also be on vacation?
Somehow, yes. Because, look, naturally it's a different environment. Every band plays 2 shows. So if it's only about the money, this doesn't work. So artists have to understand, and the ones that come, they do understand the vacation factor. They need to like this idea, you know. Because, every band plays twice, you know, but pay 1 fee, right, you know, for the whole thing. And they need to like this environment. It somehow goes a little bit back to your previous question about the dream wish list. Look, I said at the beginning, a lot of bands, they thought like, okay, this is crazy, we don't want to do this. When people know my personal career with what bands I worked with in the past and I toured with, and you look at the lineup of the very first 70,000 tons of metal, you realize almost all of these bands are bands that Andy worked with in the past as a tour manager, as a promoter, or whatever, you know. Afterwards, you know, bands, they talk with each other, and they I mean, like, word goes around, okay, this is all much different than we expected. This is one big party and whatever, you know, the fans will not harass you. So then it was easier to get a lot of bands. But to get considered, for me, it's also always, when I build the lineup, I want to have a good mix, so to speak, of genres. Naturally, one year there is probably a little bit more thrash. One year there is a little bit more classic death metal. One year there is maybe a little bit more melodic death metal. One year there is a little bit more folk metal or whatever. But I always try to create like a good mix for everybody. And for me, a lineup, I compare this always like to a flower bouquet, you know. It's not this one flower that makes a difference, it's the whole bouquet, you know. You take one out, you put another one in, it still needs to be great, you know. But it's more interesting, you know, to have a nice bouquet than you have only flowers of one kind, you know. So that's kind of my idea.
All right, Andy, I would like you to describe let's imagine there's people listen to this show that they haven't gone to even not only 70,000 but a cruise out there. They're planning to do it. They like metal and they want to go. How would you describe, from your point of view as one of the survivors, can you describe the experience?
Well, naturally, I see this from a different angle, you know, because I worked there, I created this crazy idea. I always have to point out, I have a world-class team behind me, because I'm just a guy with a stupid idea, you know, like I need a lot of people to help me do this. Look, I mean, just this huge stage that we're building. I designed the principal idea and redesigned, you know, over the years, because I wanted to make it better. I wanted to make it bigger. I always wanted to, you know, like especially on the bigger and the newer ship, you know, there is 2 jacuzzis that are in the way. So I didn't want it to build the stage diagonal or smaller, which I could have done, and it's pretty much cheaper. No, I want to have it big, and I want to have it symmetric. I want to have it in the middle. So we had to integrate those 2 hot tubs into it, you know, and build the stage over the hot tub. This doesn't really work, you know, or it does, but it's not so easy. So yeah, one time, you know, like, yeah, have a drink, think about, oh, maybe, okay, instead of building 8 towers, how about, putting a 9th motor, and we design and create like a certain hinge, you know, and pull this thing up and connect it above it. All these kind of ideas come from me. Afterwards, there is professional riggers and designers and to do all the statics and everything, you know. This pool deck stage is a book of 298 pages of all formulas and calculations, wind loads, everything. If you build something like this on land, it's like kid's birthday party, right? You know, but on a ship, it's a totally different story. And I never wanted to spend that money and get the jurors from the Guinness World Record book on board, but we truly know this is the biggest open air stage structure to ever sail the open seas, you know. Wow. It needs several hundred people that work the entire first night through to build that stage. This is why on the first night there is no shows. There's on the pool deck stage, only on the 3 indoor stages, you know.
Now that you mention, of course, there are 3,000 fans, or that's together with the artists?
No, there is, look, I mean, to give you the full scope, it's roughly 3,000 fans. Then there is about 1,000 non-revenue guests, like we call them. So this is all the artists, all the artists' crew, our crew, security, some press, VIP. So this is about another 1,000 people. and then the ship itself has between 13 and 1,500 people crew.
Cool.
So in total, there is way over 5,000, almost 5,500 people on board. You know, this is a little town. It's and all sailing out on the ocean. It's pretty special, you know. Coming back to your original question, look, I work the entire night through. The only time I actually get some sleep on board is when we are at our destination and people go and have a party at the beach. Then I get some sleep, you know. Otherwise, I run around there 24 hours a day because my job is not to have a party. I'm there to make sure all these thousands of fans and also all the artists have the best week of the year and have a really great vacation and have the party of their life. You know, this is my job. So I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, you know, like maybe you have to ask some of my survivors, you know, like they give you a different answer.
I am a survivor myself, and I had a great time. I really recommend it. I really do.
Thank you.
Of course, as you mentioned also, there are some years that you have some music bias, to put it some way. But when I were there, it was a great show. It was great to see there was this community, really nice. So the first one was in what year, you said?
The first 70,000 tons of metal was in 2011.
2011,
yes.
And year after year, non-stop, right?
Well, I mean, there were two really hard years that the whole world was going south, where there unfortunately was no 70,000 tons of metal. But other than that, every year, and this was also, by the way, like from the beginning on, my idea, like, okay, I want to create something especially for the people like in the colder area, so needing here in Colombia you don't really have seasons, you know, so it doesn't really matter. But for somebody that lives in Canada or in Sweden or in Finland, I mean, for them going in January or whatever to the Caribbean, this is perfect, right? I also from the beginning on thought I would never want to have this in the summer. Because there is a lot of other festivals or whatever. There is too much competition. So all these ideas, they were from the beginning on, you know, like, and not before the holidays. So afterwards, end of January, I knew this from the past, also from tours. Like in Europe, we talk about the January hole when there is nothing going on, right? You know. Flights are relatively affordable during that time, you know, so that all helps to bring it together. So we always had it end of January, beginning of February. The only year when we went much earlier at the beginning of January was in 2020, because the Super Bowl, the American Super Bowl, was actually in Miami and itself, and that during our usual time, and this would have been a death sentence, you know. Flights are the double, the triple, the hotels are completely unaffordable. So I had two choices.
That was still a very stressful situation there.
So this is why we had it earlier in January, which didn't really make things much easier, you know, because having it right after Christmas, New Year, you know, because over the holidays everybody disappears, you know. You can call whatever you want, emails don't get answered and so on, and then having it right after the holidays, this was challenging, you know. But this was a special situation. Otherwise it's always the last days of January into the first days of February. So those 2 weeks, you know.
Where were you? Because I felt it. When it happened, that was the first thing I thought. There was this ship near Japan, right, full of people, and then and it bugs my mind because this was before lockdown, but that ship was all over the place in the news, and we were knowing there were 900 positives there. There were 9 people dying. Nobody wanted them to go to ground, and also from that moment in February, to July the same year, there were 40,000 crew people not being allowed to touch ground.
Yeah.
So what did you think, if you want, feel when you began listening to these things?
You know, I mean, this was a very, very special situation anyway. I have a very special personal pandemic COVID story, because like when the whole world really went south, I was in Mexico, at Hell in Heaven.
At the festival, yeah.
Yes, and which is, I mean, this was kind of a historic event, really. I mean, I still to this day, like I have kudos to the promoter there, because he pulled through with it, even though many bands actually didn't play anymore. And this was kind of not only the last metal festival, but kind of the last big music festival in the entire world for a long, long time, you know. I was there, and like really, like, I mean, we had a special activation there. We brought kind of the 70,000 tons of metal feeling a little bit to Mexico. We did this in other festivals too before, some European festivals at Heavy Montreal in Canada, and so build our own VIP platform, bring some jacuzzis there. People can sit in the jacuzzi and watch heavy metal, you know, which you don't usually get otherwise. And so anyway, to make a long story short, we were there, and I had to some of my people, I had to buy new tickets, you know, to actually go home, because, like, look, I mean, I have one of my employees who lives in Spain, but she originally comes from the Netherlands. And, you know, Spain was already under lockdown, and the situation in Spain was really dire, you know. Italy too. So she doesn't want to go back to Spain. So I bought her a different ticket to go to her family to the Netherlands, you know. And those kind of things, it was crazy, you know. Me, for personal reasons, you know, I stayed in Mexico. yeah, and afterwards, you know, like I ended up on an odyssey for 574 days, you know. But this shouldn't be part of this. This is my personal story. I'll tell you over a drink one day. You know?
You weren't.
It was really, I mean, it was really special, you know, like I also didn't want to go back to Europe, you know, like my father, come back to save Switzerland. It's like, hell no, you know, like I couldn't go back to my place in Canada because I'm not a Canadian citizen. The US was inaccessible. So there is a long story. There is a long story. And I ended up on a whole odyssey, you know. And I kept on traveling, you know. But
even
anyway,
with the restrictions, you were
even with the restrictions. Like the thing was, I stopped counting at PCR test number 34. And at the beginning, they were really expensive, especially for travel. Often you had to like a really fast result, you know, cost a couple of $100 every time. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars in these bloody tests, you know. Also, for a long time, there were not really any flights anymore, you know. So yeah, for personal reasons, I came here to Colombia too, like one time, you know. Like afterwards, when Colombia opened again, there was no direct flight here from Europe, so I had to fly via Sao Paulo to Bogota one time.
Wow.
Every time I went to the US, because there was this 14-day rule, right?
Yeah.
So when I coming from Europe, I couldn't fly to the US directly. So I had to spend 2 weeks in Mexico, or 2 weeks in the Dominican Republic, or 2 weeks in Panama, or whatever, and then I could go to the United States. It's like, yeah, crazy. So, but coming back to your question, when all this happened, I was like, holy crap, you know. Look, I'm a professional optimist.
Okay.
If I wouldn't be, I would probably not do what I'm doing, you know. You need to believe that there is a future. I thought from the beginning on, okay, this is going to be dramatic, this is going to be a pandemic, this is going to take some time, but this is not going to be the end of the world. Pharmaceutical companies will come up with solutions, science will come up with solutions, whether this is going to be treatments or vaccines or whatever, but we will somehow, as a humanity, get through this, you know. Eventually we did. I didn't really think and expect it would take so long. I thought like, oh yeah, this is going to take a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. worst case scenario, this is going to take a year, but we will find a solution, and there will be a new normal, right? Look around. The world's still around. Certain things changed, but we survived, and now we can have cruises again. However, to me, it was very, very clear. Okay, there may be not a 70,000 tons of metal next year. So immediately I went to look for financing to get us as an organization through this time. I didn't fire or lay off a single person in my team. I paid them through, and in the end, I paid them for 2 years, not just for 1 year. Not doing really much, I'm maybe sometimes too overly loyal, whatever. Not always you get paid back, So, yeah, there is an old saying in English, you want loyalty? Get a dog, But that's just the way I am,
Well, they say also, giving is giving.
Yeah, right? You don't need to really expect something back all the time, but whatever. I did what I did. Thank God, a lot of my really, really, really good people are still around, Some I paid for a long time, and then suddenly, we had like a lot of paid vacation basically, and then they left, which was kind of not so cool, but that's life, right? I also, when I looked for financing, and I thought okay, what worst case scenario? Also, in 2 years, there is no 70,000 tons of metal. And then it's impossible to get financing when all this shit gets bad. So I really made sure I have enough financing secured to survive for 2 years. And this is exactly what happened in the end. Look, when the vaccines came out and cruises started up again, maybe we could have had a 70,000 tons of metal in 2022, but I had a bad gut feeling, and this was before Omicron and some of the other variants. I was like, plus this immigration rule, in the US was still in effect. And
for European.
Almost half of our customers are from Europe. More than half of the bands are from Europe. And what I did for business, going 2 weeks to some other country so I can go into the US, I do this because, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, But, you can't ask bands to do that just to play the cruise, right? You can, and certainly nobody does this just for vacation, So my gut feeling was right that I didn't, and then we planned it immediately for 2023. A lot of things came in the end. I should have foreseen, and of course, I can always blame the insurance or the banks or the credit card processors. In the end, I take responsibility. I could have planned differently or whatever. This is one of the reasons why shit came so late last year, we needed.
Yeah.
There was problems with credit card processing, which isn't so easy for us because we have customers from over 70 countries, taking all this money. Insurance thing, banks too, everybody's going crazy now, they all want to earn money, they all want to earn the double, but then, in simple terms, okay, we can sell you your tickets, but you only get the money after the cruise.
Oh my God.
Yeah, stuff like this. So, but once again, I don't want to blame others. I take responsibility. I could have planned it differently before, but simply I couldn't sell tickets earlier, last year. This is why everything came so bloody late, and which was really suboptimal. In the end, I'm really happy it happened. It was still an amazing cruise. It felt again like the first one somehow. It felt again like the first 70,000 tons of metal, like this past January. Things were great. We had amazing weather, bands played, So, and for the first time, certainly the short distance that we sailed this year only to Bimini helped. But we made 19 course corrections on the first night. So always sailing with the wind which really helped to build our pool deck stage. I was in constant communication with the bridge. Like on my ship phone, I afterwards counted how many times I called them. It's crazy. So always get the relative wind to zero. So I mean, you have wind, and then the ship drives. So you have wind there too. So if you sail really with the wind, the relative wind you can bring to zero. So for the first time in the history of 70,000 tons of metal, we managed to bring the pool deck stage roof up before sunrise, and we could bring it to maximum trim height, and it was perfect. And so it was a great experience.
And while playing, you were doing that with the wind.
We did this also on the last day, sailing back, especially for some of the bigger bands and whatever, especially for Nightwish afterwards, the wind was absolutely zero. It was perfect. It was an amazing show, really, really, really special.
You had Nightwish.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So this comeback, of course, as you mentioned, was tough because still there were some difficulties. But what is your summary of the return?
Well, once again, I mean, after all these years of waiting and uncertainty, this was great that it happened. I'm really sorry, for some fans, this was afterwards so late when we finally could sell the tickets that it was too late. They couldn't get vacation anymore. Or they spent their money for something else, So there was not enough time for them to plan. I will promise that I will do my very, very best. This is going to be different this year. The dates are already known, January 29th to February 2nd. Sailing from Miami, and we're going to a new destination, right? To Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic, a country we've never been, and also the announcements of the initial lineup is just around the corner.
Around the corner means
we're talking about not month. We're talking about days.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. So. When can we buy the first tickets? Or you will? Okay.
Also, this, you can count the days. You don't have to talk about month anymore. This is going to be just around the corner. You'll have to be quick editing here or whatever. Otherwise, it may already have happened.
We will, of course. So for this year, we will have early sales.
That's right.
And people will be able to plan themselves, let's say, a bit better. How about the lineup?
We're working hard on it. Like a lot of this, of course, is a very, very long process. Sometimes certain deals roll over. For example, we just talked about Nightwish before. This was originally being put in place for the 2021 cruise. So that deal rolled over twice, to 2023. The same thing, like many bands for next year, they are already confirmed. It's gonna come, #soon, and I promise you it's gonna be really soon, #very soon. I know, the survivors hate this, they don't even want to hear soon anymore. Survivors and the skipper, they have a love-hate relationship. I read this many, many years ago, like somewhere on social media. I believe it was on Facebook or something like this. One guy posted, "Oh, Andy Piller, I hate this guy. 51 weeks of the year." So, of course, 1 week of the year they love me, they hate me, But this is all good sport, I know. And I know, people want to have things earlier. I will probably not change the system entirely. Maybe some bands will still come very late, but I will make sure that a much bigger part of the lineup is going to be announced much earlier. This is what my survivors and my customers want, and this is what I will give.
Great. Do you think there will be a point in history where the next day the 70,000 tons of metal ends, it's selling, and then it sells out in one day, just like a vacuum, for example? Or do you think that's difficult because of the logistics?
It's not impossible, I would say. But look, we have, as you know, we have like a pre-sale system of our existing survivors, you know. So if you have been there before, you can buy before. If you have been 3 or more times, you are a gold survivor, you get your gold card. These people can buy even earlier, etc. So this comes in intervals, which of course the people that have never been, they are already complaining because they are like afraid that there will not be any cabins for them at all anymore. So there is a very good change, not in the survivor sales, but for actual public sales. I can really see this happening, that one day, maybe in the first day, boom, and then there is going to be a waiting list. However, that too, there is always going to be a secondary market. You cannot buy 70,000 tons of metal tickets on the black market. That's not how it works, because you don't buy a ticket, you buy a cabin, right? Or you buy a place in a cabin, a single tickets. You cannot just sell this to double the price to somebody else. We don't do this, you know, because it's personalized. There needs to be a name in the manifest or whatever. So when people cancel, we have, and it's actually sold out. And we had this in the past, you know, not within the first day, but after a couple of months before the cruise already, there was a waiting list. You can be on the waiting list, and some spots become available, then you can buy them, you know.
Great. For Colombian fans in particular, do you have special agents or representatives? I understand there's no secondary market, but there are people getting together to do tours and stuff. Do you support those groups or?
Yes, I mean there is a part of my amazing. We always call them customer care team, you know, my ticketing team. They and we have travel partners in quite a few different countries around that offer kind of package deals together with flights, etc. Thing is, however, it always makes it difficult for because everybody has different needs. Many people that actually do this trip, they don't just fly to Miami only for the cruise. Some, they want to go also afterwards for a few days to New York or for a few days to Las Vegas, or they want to rent a car in Florida and drive around, or they have an uncle somewhere in Ohio and want to go to see their uncle afterwards, or something like this, you know. So like most people still like buy individual tickets, you know, like and arrange their own travel. The internet nowadays made it much easier too. But yes, I mean, like, and you can check it out on our website, you know, like under travel partners. There are travel partners in many different countries, and so that offer packages, and you can buy the tickets through them too. Yes.
Okay, so what can we expect for this year? What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, as I already told you, I will do my very fucking best, you know, that sales start much earlier, that a much bigger part of the lineup is announced much earlier. You can expect a new destination in a country that we have never been before. We've never been to the Dominican Republic, so Puerto Plata, I already told you. And there is going to be a couple of surprises that we always have. I can't reveal too much here, but there is some bands that will play again, like a live world premiere on board their new album. We also will have a band. It's actually, let's just say it's a Latin band.
Latin band.
It's a band from the Latin world. Let's put it like this, you know, that will record a live DVD on board, you know, and you can be part of that live DVD, but only on 70,000 tons of metal.
Only.
The original, the world's biggest heavy metal cruise, only there, you know. So, and it's going to be a very special show, and maybe we'll have 2-3 more surprises, you know. So,
Andy, in Latin America, we have, let's say, our own hard rock and metal scene. Mm-hmm. And people is, I would say, classic in terms of melody. And of course, we have growling death metal, black metal, but there's this bands, hard rock, heavy metal, like melodic heavy metal bands. Can we expect at one point in time having one of those bands being featured at the cruise?
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, we already had bands from Colombia and many other Latin American countries before, and we always want to make it and keep it interesting, So naturally, there is always some bands that have been before, but I also try to bring in new blood. I always try to feature some lesser known bands, that I really think of are of good quality and deserve that stage that 70,000 tons of metal is, So as I already told you, there is certainly gonna be a Latin band. There is gonna be more. There is gonna be more than one, Yes.
Okay. Will 70,000 tons have a sister or a brother sailing Europe at one point, or anywhere else?
Well, maybe Europe, maybe somewhere else, there is many continents, there is many oceans, Actually, I was working on projects before that unfortunate pandemic happened, and this threw us all a huge wrench, That project hasn't died, and I'm still working on this, so this all got delayed. Maybe it would have already happened, or it would happen this year if the pandemic wouldn't have happened. But I'm still working on this. It may be a sister or a brother of 70,000 tons of metal. It won't be probably 70,000 tons of metal. Maybe it will be called something else. 70,000 tons of metal is like a family, and you don't want to break up the family, because this is also, I'd like to keep this a unique annual event, 70,000 tons of metal, because look, there is people, of course, they have money and they can just afford this. There is other people, they have to save the entire year, because it's not just a cruise. And unless you live somewhere in South Florida, you'll have to fly there. You probably need at least one night of hotel before. So, by the way, I highly recommend anybody that's doing this, fly in the day before. Always fly in the day before.
Not the day.
Not the day. Because the ship doesn't wait. It doesn't, So if your flight gets delayed or disrupted or whatever, you will be standing there in tears on the port, and you can wave the ship. That's not the idea. Fly in at least one day before, So there will be probably other ones, but 70,000 tons of metal will be one unique thing, Like, you don't want to do two. And then, like, people hear this story, what happened on the other ship, and I was on the wrong ship, and this and that, and you split up the You also don't want to do two birthday parties. No, okay. Because then some of your friends are invited to the one, but they hear the great stories of the fun that happened at the other party. Like, no. One party once a year. This is also what makes it special, Like, I sometimes compare this a little bit, like with a football World Cup. Why is this so special? Because it happens only every 4 years. If this would happen every year, it wouldn't be the same, So yeah, but coming back to your original question, I always meander and come from one thing to 3,000, But yeah, that's a little. Thank you. Some people like, Eddie, come to the fucking point.
Go on.
Good. There are plans for maybe some other events.
How about land?
There are a lot of promoters on land that do a lot of things, There is a much bigger part of our beautiful world that is covered by water. All the other promoters, they can have the land. I'll take the water. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay.
Never say never.
As always in life, never say never. Exactly. There were already ideas and this and that. Like, I would not say that I will not do something on land one day. but it's not that I have really concrete plans right now. I mean, there were some talks about some big festivals in some places and whatever being had one day maybe, but right now, at least in the next 1 or 2 years, not really in the books, no.
Okay. And just to finish and of course let you go, any hard rock star moments in your cruise? And let me put some clue here. Do you have a helicopter landing ground in your cruise? Maybe an artist being late or being sick, or I don't know. From the highlights of your experience, moments, weird, great moments.
Okay, we always try through life. I also always learned, hey, have a plan B, and as soon plan A becomes shaky, I immediately go and work on plan C. Not with artists, but I mean, without throwing a really good person in my team under the bus, you know. But something happened a few years ago, and we were missing a very significant part of equipment, which were actually the banners on the stage. You know, like, of course, I mean, we could have had the whole cruise, all the bands play or whatever, but unfortunately, the wrong banners were packed. It was from the smaller ship from years ago, you know, and they were much smaller. That's not gonna work. But we were already we were already sailing when we found out. So yeah, I mean, the first thing is I'm in the production office and I'm like, oh, where's the coffee machine? I'll throw it out of the window. But then it's like, okay, Andy, stay calm, easy. And I'm like, all right, let's think. 10 seconds. Okay, that's the solution. All right, where's the next landing strip? Charter a private jet, put these bloody banners into a jet, fly them to Haiti, get somebody from the port there, meet somebody with a jet, bring them over. At least we have the banners on the way in return, and we can have all the nice pictures for the press and for marketing and whatever. Well, that's stuff that we do, you know. Not with artists, and generally, especially also, I mean, the real funny stories actually didn't happen on the ship, but as I told you at the beginning, I was a tour manager for 15 years. I could tell some stories, not for no reason, you know. I'm half Swiss, we tend to be very diplomatic, you know, like, so my lips are sealed. Yeah. Naturally, there are some really funny stories, but I don't really want to now throw a certain band under the bus. I actually thought about this one time, especially with the helicopter, like more make this on purpose or something like this. Not so far, but yeah, there is maybe some crazy ideas, you know. So we'll see. You know, I like publicity stunts, you know.
Andy, thank you so much for your time here.
Thank you very much for having me.
I really had a great time. And I don't know if you want to talk about something I didn't ask you.
Once again, I just want to say, you can watch this, you can go on social media and on YouTube and watch all the videos and all the pictures and read all the stories about 70,000 tons of metal. You cannot fully comprehend what it is until you are there yourself. You know, you gotta do this yourself. And only then, once you walk over this gangway, together with all these bands and people from over 70 different countries around the world, you will really feel, oh my God, this is the United Nations of heavy metal at sea. And we are truly all in the same boat, you know. So you gotta experience this yourself. Try to do it one time if you can. And once again, you know, this is what makes me most proud, having these people from all over the world. I believe that getting together with people from other world, like intercultural understanding, is utterly important, because the big problems in our world we are only able to solve as a humanity as a whole, and for that we need intercultural understanding. We need to travel. We need to meet people from other parts of the world, from other cultures, with other beliefs. They have the same dreams. They have the same problems. They have the same sorrows. They probably have different solutions for the same problems that we have. We need to talk with them. We need to meet them. We need to understand, because the big problems in our world, they don't stop at borders. Borders are, for me, they are only lines on maps and are in people's minds.
You can't see them.
You know, you can't see them. You know, and they don't stop there. We as a humanity, we have to work together. This is why we still have to travel, you know, and have to meet people and have this understanding for other cultures. That's utterly important. And I believe 70,000 tons of metal is one of these places where you can, meet people from all different ways of life, from all different parts of the world, you know, that come there together for the love of the music, you know. So it's a great place.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure that you had me here.
It was for us.
Thank you very much.